Welcome to this session on climate and environmental crimes, climate and environmental security, and crimes that affect the environment. My name is Benjamin Pohl. I lead the climate and security program at adelphi, and it's a great pleasure to have you all here and to moderate this panel. And before we get into the properly into the discussion, allow me to give a little bit of background as to why we are organizing this session here on the topic of crimes against the environment at the BCSC, because I think it's the first time that this topic comes up here. And some of you might wonder how these topics interlink. But while the fields are distinct, they in fact overlap in two important ways. The first is that climate change is, of course, in part driven by deforestation, land use change, and which is often related to crimes against the environment in terms of illegal trade in timber or illegal mining. And so fighting environmental crimes also has to play a role in mitigating climate change. And the second aspect is the security side of the equation, because in many regions of the world, crime is a key security issue. In some regions, the biggest security issue. And crimes against the environment are a very significant part of this, and they are increasingly also interlinked with other forms of crime. And this became fairly clear during discussions we had earlier this year in Rio de Janeiro, where we hosted a smaller sister conference to the BCSC, and where we just realized just how much fighting crimes against the environment was a key part of the climate, peace, and security agenda in Latin America, where the main emissions factor is land use change, and the main security threat is organized and violent crime. So much for the background, and we realized this overlap. We thought we should discuss it here in Berlin as well, and I'm very glad to have that we have such a great panel with us, representing the German and Peruvian governments, international organizations, UNTOC and INTERPOL, and civil society, represented by the Wildlife Justice Commission and the WWF. So welcome. My idea is that we start off with a short question to each panelist and then broaden it out, the discussion. So, you can already start noting down your questions, comments that you might want to flag. And to start us off, I wanted to ask Dr. Markus Schröder, who heads the Division for Strategic Aspects of International Cooperation at our Ministry of Environment, to give us a glimpse of the global scale of the problem with the environment security nexus, what he sees as key challenges of addressing it, and maybe also what the German government, the ministry, is doing to address these. Markus, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to join this conversation with so many colleagues who share with me the conviction that protecting our environment and safeguarding peace increasingly belong to the same picture. At my ministry, the Federal Ministry for the Environment and Climate Action, we have learned environmental policy can no longer stop at forests, oceans, or climate targets. It must also include a clear-eyed view of how the destruction of nature fuels instability, weakens institutions, and erodes trust in societies. In many regions of the world, the environment has quietly become part of the security debate, not through dramatic events, but through everyday losses of forests, of land, of livelihoods. Environmental crime is now the third most profitable criminal business worldwide, after drugs and counterfeiting. It generates up to $250 billion every year, and yet it often goes unnoticed. No alarms, no headlines, just a misting forest, a polluted river, a silent coastline. These crimes are deeply transnational. Timber may be cut illegally in one country, shipped through another and sold legally somewhere else. Gold extracted illegally in Latin America or Africa travels through complex supply chains to consumers in Asia, Europe, and North America. And the profits rarely stay where the resources come from. It is a global business model with very local consequences. And those consequences go far beyond environmental damage. Environmental crime is not only about nature, it funds violence and undermines states. In Somalia, for example, more than 8 million trees were cut between 2011 and 2017 for charcoal production. The profits of that helped finance Al-Shabaab, while deforestation dried up soils, displaced communities. And in Africa, revenues from illegal gold and mineral extractions have supported groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. In Latin America, illegal mining, land grabbing, and logging fuel corruption, armed groups and violence. It fuels corruption, armed groups, and violence. So when we talk about environmental crime, we are also talking about political stability, social cohesion, and the ability of states to function. Despite these impacts, environmental crime is still too often treated as a minor offense, a crime without victims. But the victims are real. Communities who lose their forests, their land, their income, and their trust in institutions. Where justice is absent, people turn away from the state. And when institutions lose legitimacy, democracy is at risk. Environmental crime is not marginal, it is systemic. And because environmental crime does not stop at borders, neither can our response. And Germany is therefore strengthening cooperation with international partners. Some of them are here today, especially Interpol. Earlier this year, we had the honor of welcoming Interpol Secretary General Valdesi Urquiza to Berlin. Together with Interpol and the WWF, we launched the Gaia Initiative, a 5 million euro program to detect, investigate, and prevent environmental crime. I'm sure we are going to hear a little bit more about that. And this partnership is a very practical example of how we can link environmental governance with enforcement and security. Because in my recollection, this is the first time ever that the Environment Ministry is working together with an enforcement institution. This is not our traditional partner. This is something new, and this is something we value very much because things are growing more and more together and need to be looked at together. To sum it up, to break the business model of environmental crime, we need stronger international cooperation, we need consistent enforcement and further legal frameworks globally, and broader alliances across government, civil society, science, and the private sector. All these sectors need, this is just words, but all these sectors need to work, and we have started to do so with this project and also with hosting this panel today. So thank you very much, and I'm looking very much forward to our discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much for plunging us right in and sort of showing how big of an intricate of a threat it is. Next, I want to turn to Olivier Swag-Goldman, who is the Executive Director of the Wildlife Justice Commission, also to ask you a little bit to share your insights from the work of the Commission on sort of what how you see the problem, but also what the key challenges maybe are from a justice perspective, and then also already turning, as Marcus has already done, a little bit to the sort of the entry points for overcoming these challenges, which will then be sort of the discussion once we get into that part. Olivia, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, and thank you for including the Wildlife Justice Commission and in this important event and for hosting this event, because I think right away we're seeing this cross-pollination, right? Thinking about environmental crime is relevant to the climate and security issue. So just the fact of having this event is really, really important and is one of the recommendations that I would give. But just for those that don't know the Wildlife Justice Commission, we're a nonprofit organization based in The Hague and really set up to ensure accountability for wildlife crime, to ensure the top level criminals are getting arrested and consistently convicted, so that we stop the destruction of our biodiversity for profit by criminal groups. And we're 10 years old, and we infiltrate the criminal networks together with local law enforcement partners, and then also translate what we see on the ground into policy work. So that's a little bit what where our policy recommendations come from, is on our operational work and seeing what works. And I have to say the non-traditional partner speaks to us, Dr. Schroeder, very, very closely, because it's always looking at where you can be most effective, right? Who are the partners that in a particular institution, a particular country, a particular organization are going to help you to really move the dial and make sure that you're getting those individuals that are most accountable, and that also ensure that the networks then are disrupted so that they're not able to destroy our biodiversity. So just to add to Dr. Schroeder's, all those incredible numbers, environmental crime and even just wildlife crime, broader, including forestry crime and marine crime, costs local communities $1 to $2 trillion per year. That's the World Bank estimate. It's a big gap, 1 to 2, but nevertheless, huge amounts of consequences, also just on the financial side for these local populations. So it's absolutely imperative that we do something about it. It is a global problem, and people think of it traditionally as kind of an African problem. It's the rhinos. Yes, it is the rhinos and the elephants and the pangolins, but it's also the turtles and tortoises. It's the birds. It's the European glass eels that are being trafficked to the point of extinction. Latin America plays a key role in terms of sources, the birds and the jaguar and other species that we're losing, as well as through transit. So it really is global, and the money does go everywhere. There's huge amounts of profits being generated that are supporting these armed groups, or these criminal groups, in also other forms of organized crime. So the links with drug trafficking, human trafficking, weapon trafficking, all of that is all really, really interlinked. We've seen concrete examples of that in our work, and then we try and translate that into what that means from a policy perspective as well. So specifically, the challenges we see from a justice perspective, there are 3 of them. The first is treating environmental crime like serious and organized crime. It's still treated like the Cinderella, if you will, of crime, whereas it's devastating. It's devastating our biodiversity, with also impacts, obviously, on climate, on human health, on rule of law. So it's absolutely essential that we treat it like the serious and organized crime that it is, and we know how to address organized crime. We just haven't been doing it for environmental crime. So that's the number one issue, I think. The second is the lack of cooperation. Dr. Schroeder also mentioned this. So the need to cooperate across boundaries. So public-private partnerships are critical, but also within a government, different ministries working together, and then obviously transnationally. So those are 3 areas of cooperation that are challenging and need to be bolstered. And finally, I would say it's the thematic silos. And that's why I'm so pleased to be here today and to have this event, because you have the climate discussion, you have the biodiversity discussion, you have the trafficking in endangered species discussion, and yet it's one ecosystem, it's one environment. We've got to be working together and breaking down these silos. Just so to kick off how to adjust that, how to change it, the opportunities, I would say again, 3. First and foremost, to use the advanced investigative techniques that we have. We know how to do it. It's included in the UN Organized Crime Convention, which I'm sure Carlos is just doing a tremendous job leading that endeavor. The UN Anti-Corruption Convention, bringing in these treaties that are already there and utilizing them to address environmental crime, absolutely essential. The second is, in terms of breaking down the silos, more events such as this. Also at the UNCAC in Doha in December, and looking towards the Crime Congress in Abu Dhabi in April. And finally, the cross-sectoral partnerships, so working together through civil society organizations, international organizations, national governments, and different ministries. So those would be my 3 suggestions for how to address this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Olivia. That's already, I think, getting us into some of the substance where where the responses, the entry points to them would lie. Now I'd like to ask Carlos Sanchez de Aquila, who works at the permanent mission of Peru to the UN, is the chair of the intergovernmental experts group that is trying to sort of identify ways to address this more forcefully in international law. To share your perspective, Carlos, what does it look like also from the national perspective of Peru at the national level, but then also maybe at the regional level? What do you see as the critical challenges, and then what are sort of the good practices and lessons learned that you're bringing to Vienna to sort of inform the global fight against crimes against the environment?
Good morning, good morning or good afternoon to everyone, and thanks Ben for the opportunity. I would like to begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to the Berlin Climate and Security Conference, the German Federal Foreign Office, and adelphi for convening this very timely panel. It is an honor to address you on behalf of Peru, a country that is both rich in biodiversity and deeply exposed to the escalating impacts of environmental crime. For us, this is not merely an environmental or criminal justice issue. It is a matter of national security, sustainable development, and rule of law. Peru is one of the major shareholders of the Amazon rainforest, the Andean ecosystem, as well as coastal and marine areas in the Pacific coast. These natural assets are increasingly targeted by powerful organized criminal networks engaged in illegal mining and logging, wildlife trafficking, and environmental pollution. To give you an example of the dimension of this problem, between 2020 and 2024, Peru recorded nearly 5,000 cases of illegal logging and close to 3,000 cases of illegal mining, as well as a sharp increase in wildlife trafficking and environmental contamination. These crimes are part of a complex and highly profitable transnational economies that also involve trafficking in drugs, in persons, in firearms, as well as money laundering and corruption. In response to these threats, Peru has strengthened its legal and institutional framework. For example, environmental crimes are clearly defined under our penal code. We adopted a national strategy for the prevention and reduction of environmental crime focused on prevention, enforcement, and restoration. We approved a national strategy for the reduction and interdiction of illegal mining to 2030, aimed to dismantle illicit value chains of this illicit activity. We also invested in satellite and drone monitoring, a stronger interinstitutional coordination, and specialized prosecution. But we also believe firmly in collective action at the regional and global level. As part of the Andean community, Peru promotes joint operations through the Resolutive Action Plan, the High-Level Group, and the 24/7 Andean Security Network. Within the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, we align national actions with the regional priorities to address transnational criminal dynamics, as reaffirmed in the Bogotá Declaration past August. Globally, Peru co-sponsored Resolution 12/4 at the UNTOC Conference of the Parties in October 2024, together with Brazil and France. This landmark resolution established the Intergovernmental Expert Group on Crimes that Affect the Environment to review the Convention's application, identify legal gaps, and propose concrete responses to fill these gaps, including the possibility and feasibility of additional protocols. Peru has the honor to chair this expert group, a responsibility we embrace with ambition and clear sense of purpose. Through this process, we have identified key gaps. For example, environmental crimes are not recognized as an autonomous category under the UNTOC. Legal fragmentation limits judicial cooperation. Financial investigation and in special investigative techniques remain underutilized, as mentioned by Olivia. Protection of environmental defenders and indigenous peoples is still insufficient, and this is something we must underline. National and regional efforts alone are not enough. We need harmonized legal definitions and penalties, a stronger international cooperation, robust financial investigations, protection for indigenous peoples and environmental defenders, and closer integration between environmental, climate, and criminal justice agendas. I think this is one of the most important issues we must develop. To conclude, the Amazon, the Andes, and our coastal ecosystems are not just Peruvian treasures. They are global environmental assets. Protecting them is not optional. It is a national and collective responsibility that underpins climate stability, biodiversity, and human security. As we approach to the next session of the Conference of the Parties of the UNTOC in October 2026, Peru and Latin America are not just participants. We are shaping the agenda. Our goal is to ensure environmental crime is no longer treated as low risk and high reward. We must make it high risk and zero impunity. Let us bring clarity, urgency, and ambition to this process. The road ahead is difficult, but with shared responsibility, multilateral cooperation, sustainable leadership, and by deploying disruptive diplomacy that challenge the status quo, we can move towards a safer, fairer, and more sustainable, inclusive, and resilient world. Vielen Dank.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carlos. That was great. And it got us right into this, the challenge of linking the national to the international action. And for this, I wanted to bring in Thomas Ungebühler, who is Assistant Director at INTERPOL, working on sort of helping countries jointly fight these crimes and prevent the consequences that you have outlined. And I want to sort of ask you maybe to give us a little bit from the ground up a perspective on sort of do you have good case studies that you could share of how this looks like and what your work in addressing these preventing these crimes looks like, and what might be lessons learned that then could inform the legal processes that are ongoing in Vienna. So what in a sense, what are the key levers for making the fight against crimes against the environment more successful? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, for the kind words and also for the invitation. Ladies and gentlemen, initially I was thinking to ask you a simple stat of environmental statistics, but then I came to the conclusion you might be aware as interested audience of such numbers. And as Markus and Olivia already said some examples of crime convergence, I can tell you that the crime convergence to environmental crimes goes way beyond just to the connection to our environment. And therefore, I would like to ask you if you are aware that human beings, mostly young women, are subject to sexual exploitation of environmental perpetrators to please them and to keep them animated to follow up with their illegal activities. And when I speak about sexual abuse, we are not speaking about forced prostitution. We speak about locked up women, violence, and rape. And in the same vein, countless people are forced by violence to work under incredible inhuman conditions in illegal environmental facilities, filled up with illicit pharmaceutical drugs to ease their pain, to make them work in a kind of modern slavery. As police officer, for me, when it comes to public speaking, and this is a little bit my problem, I cannot dig dig too deep in such examples, and I cannot provide concrete details to such cases. But I wanted to give you an idea of the excesses that national police officers and my teams during their deployments worldwide are facing by tackling environmental crimes. That's the most remarkable fact in this. So, however, in the next few minutes, I would like to give you a brief overview who we are and what we are working on. As Ben already mentioned, my name is Thomas Ungerbühler. I'm a German police officer. I'm seconded from the Bavarian State Police to Interpol since 2022. And I'm truly grateful to represent Interpol the first time here in the Berlin Climate and Security Conference here in my home country. Interpol started actively tackling environmental crimes already in 2010. In the last 15 years, the environmental security program developed very much and is currently set up, and this is a good recognition for us, currently set up in a proper subdirectorate in Interpol, and we are working on 5 crime areas in illegal mining, pollution, fisheries, wildlife, and forestry. Due to the convergence of environmental crimes to other crime areas, and most of all to transnational organized crime, we are embedded, and this by all means, and here I can connect to Olivia, to the Organized and Emerging Crimes Directorate in Interpol. This said, it's important for you to know that Interpol is the biggest criminal police organization of the world with a network of 196 national police forces of our member countries. And we are mandated to exchange nominal police data for investigation and trials via our secured network. South America was always and is currently one of our focal points of activities, and thanks, like Markus already mentioned, to the project Gaia funded by the German Ministry of Environment, we are working there together with our partners from Worldwide Fund for Nature Germany on illegal mining, pollution, and fisheries. Also, together with our friends from UNODC, we are covering illegal deforestation in South America related in the framework and related crimes in the framework of Norway's Project LEAP. When it comes to tackling environmental crime is Interpol, so it requires different approaches due to the development of our member countries. And I will give you some brief examples of our work in South America, covering some different kind of support. In Brazil, we supported the first operation of the International Police Cooperation Center, the CCPI, recently inaugurated in September in the Amazonas region in Manaus. And there we were targeting mining infrastructure, mercury trafficking, money laundering, illegal logging, corruption, and of course, violation of human rights. As a result, hundreds of dredges could be disrupted during the operational deployment, and the environmental impact has been calculated up to be 160 million euro, very conservative, calculated for a time frame of 7 months. In Brazil, we are also supporting in the framework of Project Gaia, Brazil's Clean Gold program, Ouro Alvo, to create a regional forensic database to analyze and trace the origin of seized gold. And thanks to our excellent collaboration with Peru, a major timber trafficking network exporting to Europe, Asia, and the US could be dismantled. We could support this long-lasting case with forensic technology, data extraction, analysis of seized equipment, and case coordination. And I don't want to just please Carlo, because here is on the table. With Peru, we do have truly a kind of role model collaboration, because we are working there with specialized environmental units, prosecutors, financial investigations, and diplomatic representation. What are our good practices? When we are working in the countries, we are working with our country points of contact, the national police forces, but beyond, like in the example of Peru, and this includes forensic data extraction, criminal intelligence analysis, of course, access to Interpol databases, and most important, police work, investigative and operational support. 3 takeaways as conclusion. Climate change is connected to convergent crimes and crime enablers, and it cannot be seen isolated. Information sharing is key to connect law enforcement agencies worldwide for wider analysis, and it's already mentioned, increased usage of technology must play a key role in the future. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Thomas, for giving us some concrete examples on what this on what this work means, and also what it means for the affected people. I'm now sort of pivoting back a little bit to the global level. It's my pleasure to introduce Nicole Quijano-Evans, who is the deputy head of the Crimes That Affect the Environment program at the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, and which is secretariating the convention that forms the framework for fighting crimes against the environment. And I also want to ask you to give us a quick glimpse into how UNODC is helping fight environmental crimes. And then also maybe a little of reflection on what the state of the international legal framework on this is. Carlos, of course, already mentioned a little bit, but maybe also from the Secretariat's perspective, where is it, where does it need strengthening? Or, where should the focus be? Nicole, yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Adelphi and Germany for organizing this and bringing crimes that affect the environment. And I'm sorry, I should use crimes that affect the environment, but it's so long for political reasons. We have that term, but I will use environmental crime for time purposes to bring it as a topic and prioritize it. I've been working for more than 20 years now with UNODC, with transnational crime. I'm a criminologist, and I have attended a few COPs recently. For me, it is a no-brainer that that topic is important and needs to be discussed within the broader climate agenda, but it's still not there. And when we as UNODC went to COP, people are saying, why are you here? Like, who has been murdered? This is strange. But then recently I read that 90% of deforestation is illegal. So again, I think that for us in this room, we understand where the linkages are. I just wanted to quickly highlight a few things that haven't been said. I think what is important to understand is that environmental crimes is a very complex topic, and that scares many governments, right? It is a topic where criminal networks infiltrate legal trade supply chains, which has an impact on taxes, on revenues of government, on security, on corruption, their linkages. So it's very complex, it's very difficult to understand. Also, fighting that type of crime is very complex. Just to give you a very quick example, for custom, they have to identify many illegal commodities and police, weapons, drugs, and now we come and tell them, okay, now you have to find logs that are illegally logged or identify if that timber is illegal or not. I mean, I don't know, if I have worked in many ports, I've seen containers with ports. For me, it looks all the same. For customs, it looks all the same. Extremely difficult. And again, criminal networks are infiltrating the legal supply chain, making use of it. So it's extremely, extremely difficult to, what also Olivia mentioned, what was mentioned, to disrupt those criminal networks. And this is what we have to do. So we are dealing with law enforcement capacity that doesn't have the resources. We heard today the financing of climate. When I hear that billions is pumped into this, and I'm like, where does all the money go? I mean, it's just crazy. And how are the risks mitigated? We're talking this morning about conflict-fragile states, which is penetrated by transnational organized crime. So for them, this is also a big opportunity to take this money, to have fraudulent projects, corruption, money laundering. I mean, this also, what we don't have to forget, this provides opportunities for transnational organized crime. Just quickly, legislation, very important. I mean, we have a good basis with the Transnational Convention on Transnational Organized Crime and the Corruption Convention. It generally provides the legal basis for countries, for international cooperation, for very practical tools, joint investigations, cooperation, but many countries don't apply it, right? And the problem is many countries don't treat environmental crime is serious organized crime. So I think, Carlos, you mentioned it, Marcus, you mentioned it, it's a crime that has very low risks, but enormous profits. So of course, transnational organized crime, they're like the business. It's fantastic for them. So this needs to change. Harmonization of laws need to change. And very specifically, laws need to look at the particularities of the different types of transnational organized, of environmental crime. Now, implementation. We have great laws. Yes, 2 minutes. We have great laws, but how are they being implemented on local level? That's always the issue. And again, with lack of resources, with lack of capacity, this provides a huge challenge. We as UNODC and in partnership with civil society, with Olivia's organization, for example, with INTERPOL, what we try to do is strengthen the whole criminal justice system of countries so that they are better equipped to find the vulnerabilities along the trade supply chain, for example, and to help that those vulnerabilities are removed. And we don't only want a seizure here or there. What we want to see is prosecutions. We want to see more cases because we want to have the criminal networks disrupt and being prosecuted. And I think this is also a challenge. We see seizures, we see operations that are successful, but we still don't see enough prosecutions. And we don't want to go behind a small poacher, for example, who does that for ensuring their livelihoods, but we want to really go after the big criminal networks. We have developed several tools within UNODC. For example, the latest one is a diagnostic tool for illegal mining, which helps countries to identify vulnerabilities in terms of mining and corruption. If you're interested, I encourage you to look at our website. We have legislative tools. We have very interesting research reports that shed a bit more light on what's happening in terms of environmental crime. And I stop here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for getting us in. It also into sort of the whole range of approaches that will be necessary or where there's entry points for fighting back against these environmental crimes. And I also was struggling with the 5 words of crimes against the environment that we needed in a title that was supposed to be as short as possible, but we found a compromise solution. Last but not least, let me turn to Janis San, who is a senior officer at the WWF, and who has been following this topic for a long time. And I'd very much like to get your point of view on this, where we are at, where this fight that we have been sort of looking at sort of as maybe a start into the broader discussion. And this is another reminder for you to start thinking about your questions and comments. But how do you see the state of international cooperation on this, and what are the most urgent challenges from a civil society perspective on this complex of crimes, and what maybe also might be next steps? We've already heard some, but yeah, just to sort of give a bit of a comment. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the invitation to be here. I heard so many interesting and important things already about environmental crime. I just can confirm everything. I want to repeat the point on corruption, because this to me is really very much in the center. We already ran a project with INTERPOL some years ago, funded by the EU, and when we sat down with forces, judges and prosecutors from Romania, we asked them, what's the reason for illegal logging, which is a known problem in Romania. And very much in the center was corruption. So this feeds everything. So if we talk about environmental crime, we have at the same time think and deal with corruption. That's very important. Another point that was not mentioned is that besides the fact that environmental crime is the third biggest crime in the world, it's also the fastest growing. It's much faster growing than our economy, and that concerns me very much because the EU has the second biggest deforestation footprint in the world. But there's we don't have enough power to really fight it and stop it. So the EU started with the UTR timber regulation in 2013, and I very much followed the implementation. I became a specialist on forensic methods over time, so we run a lot of market surveys, and we found, well, we do have now a regulation that wants to stop illegal wood, but it's still there. So every time we run market surveys, we found something. Charcoal was mentioned 2 times. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, because we have some people in
Yeah.
the live stream.
I'm so sorry.
Understand the signal immediately, but
I'm very sorry. So every time we run market surveys, we found suspicious, highly suspicious products. Charcoal was mentioned several times already today. So when we checked charcoal in European countries, we found between 40 and 50% made from tropical species, and the main source is Nigeria. When I contacted the environmental ministry in Nigeria, they told me more or less everything that goes to export is illegal. And the link to armed groups was already mentioned by Markus earlier. Another example, the big question is where is all this illegal products end up? So where is it? Does it disappear? And well, I would like to invite you to take your mobile phone right now and go to Google. Do it now. I just invite you. Take your mobile phone, go to Google, and write in Siberian larch, sibirische Lärche. Siberian larch. That's the wood species. Siberian larch, and then you go to products, and nearly everything you will find now, all the offers, it's dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of offers, is highly likely illegal. We do have an EU ban against Russia, and theoretically this doesn't exist. This is comparable to Google offering heroin or cocaine. This is a breach of the EU ban against Russia, and this is at the same time a breach of the European regulation against illegal wood, EUTR. And this is just one example. So we run several market surveys already this year. We gave information to the officials, but this is still ongoing. This is just Germany. We do have similar problems. So the official statistics say there is no imports from Russia, but at the same time we have an incredible increase in imports from Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Turkey. Turkey is delivering birch wood to Germany, which is not growing in Turkey. And that's when we run market surveys, what we found. And I'm quite sure this is very similar in other European countries. So that's our reality. So from an NGO perspective, from WWF, the experience is we do have environmental regulations, yes, but we do not have proper implementation. It's a lack of budget. It's a lack of, we need specialized police forces. And we need political will. So that's the basis for everything. I'm personally convinced if we not start fighting environmental crime, we will have no chance to reach the goal of Glasgow Declaration to stop deforestation until 2030. It's impossible. It was already mentioned, 60 to 90% of logging, according to INTERPOL, is illegal. most of it happening in tropical countries. So if we ignore environmental crime, we will fail for sure on stopping deforestation. Yes, that's my statements. Maybe a short add-on on the Gaia project, which I'm really happy. This is a perfect example on what can be done in practice, working together with Interpol. So the role of WWF is to work with the civil society, because in most cases they do have the best information, what's going on, where are the illegalities, but they are at risk very often. So our role is network, especially in Peru and Cameroon, that's our focal countries, connect with civil society organizations and make sure they know the best ways to reduce risks when they work on environmental crime before they step into action. That's it for now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you so much for bringing it nicely together. First, by having us experience it firsthand, and sort of tying it back to this, to these global goals that we are, not going to be able to meet unless there is a step change in how we fight back against these crimes. Now, thanks to the discipline of this large panel, we still have a good 15 minutes for questions and comments. And yes, already that's great. Antonio, floor is yours.
I know that the terror of every chair is to say that it's open for question, and no one has. Thank you. It's been very interesting. My question is primarily to Thomas and Nicole, and I'm in touch with. My name is Antonio Sampaio. I'm a PhD researcher at King's College London, previously at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. I've done some research on environmental crime in the Amazon. My question is about the local capacities versus national central government capacities. I think that the Gaia project, as you outlined and it sounds amazing. And I have no doubt that for instance, the CCPI, the Center for Police Cooperation in Manaus, would be an excellent, amazing initiative. And actually in Brazil, you have excellent centers such as the Federal Police, which does excellent investigative capacity. What I was saying yesterday in a side event on my research focuses on cities and urban capacities to fight crime. There's the major gaps, some of the deepest structural problems with environmental crime and fighting organized crime, especially in the Amazon, is at the urban level, the local level, and especially in the towns and medium sort of cities that we here in this room may not even know the names of them, but it's there. That a lot of, for instance, the gold that gets panned in the Amazon, they go and they sell. There are institutions in those towns that have a license from the central bank, but no one is supervising them. So they are allowed to gather the gold and say, this is legal, and give the money to the gold panners. And that after they do that, that gold is free to the world, like, free to navigate the world. So what I'm saying is, and Nicole touched on, capacity building for the criminal justice sector, which I'm sure includes a level of local. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on this. How do we get that amazing sort of multilateral level, Interpol and UNODC together, to filter down into capacities on those little forgotten, towns and cities that I'm sure don't even know what UNODC means,
Thanks a lot. Maybe we collect a few questions.
Okay, sure.
So the global versus local, but I see a few hands. So you were first, and then.
Yeah, thank you so much. Anna-Katharina Hornitsch from IDOS, German Institute of Development and Sustainability, and here also as co-chair of the German Advisory Council to the German government on global environmental change. And I have two questions, one in the direction of UNODC. I mean, ODA is going down, and we earlier this morning already reflected on what that means in the field of climate finance. It means that grants are more and more becoming the norm in order to actually engage in climate adaptation and mitigation. And that, of course, means that fragile states are left out relatively more than before. Now, you pointed to the fact that accessing these climate funds also bears a potential for further illicit practices, corruption, etc. Could you, I mean, what would be your main advice on safeguarding exactly against that, yeah? And also balancing at the same time the fact that the money gets less and less accessible for fragile contexts? And maybe in the direction of the Federal Ministry of the Environment and Climate and Nuclear. I mean, we've just in the German context have seen the forming of the National Security Council, and the lead for climate policy has moved from the Foreign Ministry to the Environmental Ministry again. At the same time, the Environmental Ministry is not one of the core participants of the National Security Council. So, Mr. Schröder, can you give us a bit of an insight of how that balance, and you can also ignore me, but how that challenge will be balanced by the ministry? Thanks.
It would be good to have a microphone, because otherwise people in the live stream cannot hear you, and then it's.
Yeah, hello. Benjamin Smail is my name. I work for a climate security project in Iraq. Thanks for the very interesting inputs. Understandably, a little bit more on the law enforcement side, I mean, from the organizations you come from. My question is, how do you make sure that you include communities and also not over-criminalize poaching? And when I talk about poaching, of course, as you mentioned, there are like many different forms of poaching. Sometimes we have estimations, it was mentioned, 3 to 20 billion in damage. But then if we look at poaching, what do we mean by poaching? I mean, it starts with subsistence poaching. So a villager is illegally killing a warthog to get something on the table. Then it goes maybe to more commercialized forms. This person now uses a truck and 2-3 people, and they not only hunt one wild hog, maybe snare it, before, but they kill a lot, and really you can see that the population already going down from the animals. And then of course we have more forms like high-end poaching, rhinos, elephants, etc. So basically I think we should always make the distinction between sustainable illegal activity, because in the end, if you have a small village somewhere, just to put it in a picture, I'm thinking about a small village. It's called Lango village in Congo Brazzaville. Right next to the Otsala-Kokua National Park, they have gorillas there, high-end tourism, great. Nobody is touching the gorillas because they know they will be hammered by law enforcement or by the rangers. What the rangers also know is that the local villagers engage in bushmeat poaching. Because in this village, nobody has any job. I mean, it's a tough life there, and of course they make some use. So this warthog, there are no warthogs, but there are some kind of wild boars also that is being killed. It's actually first a benefit for this little village. So we need to find ways to have a kind of differentiated look at it. Of course, the problem always comes then if too many people engage in hunting, and then all wildlife is depleted, and then we come maybe close to the 3 to 20 billion that we could have used. So basically, we need to find ways to really make use of national parks, nature resources for the local communities. Because if they see some potential in the wildlife, then they are also willing to protect it. And then you have the most cost-effective law enforcement, because even with rhino poaching, we have seen this in Namibia, you get tip-offs, it becomes for law enforcement very costly to enforce against the society when the rhino poacher is being seen as a hero, but if the community sees, wow, we can make some money out of tourism, etc., they are willing to protect the rhinos. And that, I will conclude shortly, but that brings me also to a very differentiated perspective, and maybe also even because we have the BMUKN here. Okay, so in Kenya, for example, we can all imagine tourism is working very well. In some places of Namibia, Botswana, etc. Nice infrastructure, people have local jobs, etc. They want to protect the wildlife. But not all areas in Africa are like this, or in other areas of the world. And there, for example, the EU is taking a very tough stance on hunting. So basically, if you have sustainable hunting, and in some areas elephants are a problem because they have too many. In Botswana, we have about 130,000 elephants. And then out of understandable motivations, I also don't like the images of trophy hunting, but sometimes if it's very regulated and if the communities can really benefit from it, it might be worth considering it. So, and that brings me now to the last point. Even sometimes one has to go a step backwards to go 2 steps in front. Yeah, so the hunting ban does not really help. It even comes across sometimes as neo-colonialistic, that we tell other countries what to do with the resources. I know it's a bit a tough stance, but I just always want to bring the perspective of the villager. I mean, the villager has to see some benefit. So that's the end of my longer question. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And I think it's a dilemma that is that of course is clearly there of you know, weighing the sort of local perspective against this against the global one. Now I'm in a little bit of a bind because we are nearing the end and we still have a number of people. I don't know, is there any more two-finger questions? Because I want to give the panel a chance to also say something to all these good questions. Then please go ahead. But if you can, sorry, Corinna.
Thank you very much. And I would like to come back to one critical point that we have addressed, but I want to dig a bit deeper and get more answers from the panel, which is corruption. We are clear about what's needed to address environmental crimes. We need the legislation, we need the capacities in law enforcement, and the political will, and we need to work against corruption. I'm sorry, when I look around this room, none of us can eliminate corruption in a, let's say, supply country in Africa. I think that's beyond our control. So I really want to know, because this is such a big obstacle. My region is the African region, so I can talk more about the supply countries. Let's take Kenya, has been mentioned, DRC. I see kingpins in a courtroom. I see them sentenced, but I also see them leave prison after a couple of weeks. And I really want to know, how do we as foreigners really and honestly want to tackle corruption in that sector? Because a lot of us, our organizations, are in these countries on the behest of the government. Do we want to go against government and tell them you're corrupt? So this is a big obstacle, and I really would like to hear your thoughts on how we really can work with this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Very, very important question. And Abigail, a very, very short question, then we do a round.
Very quick, thank you. Thanks to all of our speakers. My name is Abby Robinson, and my work on climate security the past few years has focused mainly on the role of security sector institutions like the police and military in responding to climate and environmental risks. So my brief question is really about where you see improvements and positive trends, because a lot of you have emphasized that this is not being taken seriously. The convergence of crime is not being taken as seriously as it should. That was true a few years ago. It remains, unfortunately, very true today. And so I'm just curious whether, maybe to try to end on a positive note as well, whether there's anything you can say about evidence that you do see some steps in the right direction, not just in regions that are considered to be more frontline, like South or Latin America, but also here in the EU. Any signs that that we are moving toward more effective approaches? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for for all your engagement. I know this puts the panel in a tight spot. I also encourage you, now you know the protagonists, so if there is no full answer and you want to corner them later during the conference, that'll be your chance. But thanks so much for all your questions. Maybe we just run from starting with you, Johannes, and just run through the panel with your, and you can just pick the questions you want to respond to. Right? There was the global versus local question, Antonio. There was the question of sort of how do we safeguard the big climate finance that we need, but that that of course is also then potentially open to being corrupted. How do we safeguard this? We had the question on sort of how do we balance community interests and community necessities with sort of the bigger picture fight against crime. How do we fight corruption and get the kingpins if we are in a way dependent on their on potentially their allies in government, and then I think a very good final question: what's the good news that we can celebrate? Johannes, I start with you, and then I'd go just through the panel. And I think it's okay if it's okay for everyone that we take maybe 5 minutes extra.
First, about the positive things. I'm working on this topic now for nearly 20 years, and the positive thing to me is that there is a discussion starting on environmental crime, which was not the case 15 years ago. It was a totally niche, and it was already mentioned, nearly no cases. We also have only one bigger case on illegal wood in Germany for all times. But it's growing. So there's more and more countries interested. International discussion is starting, and this gives me hope. The next step, what do we need? Put the money where the mouth is. So there's a total lack, not enough police enforcement. We do have really good examples, like in Brazil. In 2012, there was a short period when the government put out, we want to stop illegal logging. And there was enough budget for the national police, and it went down. It was a clear development. So if there is a political will, there's a way to do it. And on corruption, I just can repeat, you can't work on illegal logging without corruption. There's a need to connect with specialized organizations like Transparency International, like others, to have the specialized knowledge. There's an example from Ukraine when they started a special office focusing just on corruption. That could be copied in other countries. So, but in the end, there's no easy solution. That's one of the very hard nuts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. There was a nice series already of positive trends. Thomas?
These were a couple of very tough questions, honestly. If it would easy to address, then if it would be easy to address, then we would be all happy. I try to come to a few things. So, to your question with the gold, I already mentioned that we, in the framework of Project Gaia, are supporting Brazil to create this clean, not to create, but to support the Clean Gold program, and to support this regional forensic database. We are following up with neighboring countries. I mean, these things are taking time, of course, but the goal is that the traceability of gold out of the South American region will be done with this. This to the gold question. Corruption. Of course, in Interpol, I'm in the Organized and Emerging Crime Directorate, and our partners from the Interpol Financial Crime and Anti-Corruption Center are working close with us. We have, for example, another project in our unit running where a corruption specialist is directly integrated to us. That does not mean that we solve the problems in every country. But different successes we could already face, mostly one huge success in Peru. We try to bring together all the relevant forces in the countries. For us as police officers, it's important not just to have the national police forces, we want to have the FIUs, the financial intelligence units, the anti-corruption units. We want to have them all together to discuss cases and to analyze the crime convergence. This to the corruption question. The last question was, how we bring it forward. Our goal, I mean, we are police officers. Interpol is a police organization, and our goal is that our frontline expertise, including all the variety of enforcement challenges, is transported to a higher level. I have to confess then it's out of our hands, but it should serve at least, I always call it in this way, to make policy and lawmakers influence. We try to influence to make policies and laws more digestible. Digestible also for the last police officer standing on any remote spot in the world, dedicated to a local poacher, which is of course not a subject of Interpol support, because we go for international, transnational organized crimes and for international organizations. So this is our way forward, how we try to transport this, and of course to the higher levels, to the United Nations in the framework of the CCPCJ. And also this is a very good environment to speak about things like this. Let me see if I forgot something. I don't think for police is more to address it was a lot for you and ODC in there.
Thank you, and I can talk really long time, but I try to be brief, but happy to continue this during the lunch break. I love the questions, all of them, really. Very quickly. Training. I know that international organizations, or in general, training is increasingly criticized. We train and train and train and train and train the same things, and then bilaterally training and Interpol and all the same. So why aren't we better? I think, I do believe capacity building is very important, but how you do it. And I couldn't agree more with you that the local context is key. And we don't want to have this approach where we come in as teachers and train. We want to build a capacity that is sustainable. So, for example, integrating in the national training curricula of the police, of customs, you know, having it integrated, because we don't want to come and waste money again and again and train the same things, but it should be an approach where it's sustainable, build the capacity within training academies so they can pass on the knowledge. And then it's, you know, they are self-sufficient. This should be the goal. And the local context needs to be understood so it trickles down. I can speak more about that, but just agree with you. On your point about safeguarding the money, this is very complicated and complex. And I know, for example, the carbon trade is also something that is more and more fraudulent cases. So what can be done? Proper risk assessment, really, especially in those areas that are particularly vulnerable, like procurement, for example, right? I'm not an expert on this, but really proper risk assessment and risk mitigation, and also better partnerships with the private sector. Right? This is very important to assess and mitigate. Again, this is a complex topic. I think it takes a little bit more time. Corruption, of course, plays in there too. Communities. I couldn't agree more with what you have said. Communities and environmental defenders are actually the first ones who detect those crimes, right? They're at the forefront, and they're the ones least protected. They're usually the ones that are very suspicious of law enforcement, so there's no link. How do you report those types of crimes, and how do you ensure that they are not being then punished. And the distinction of poaching also very important. And I mentioned it, we don't want to really go after the small villagers who, I don't know, kill a cheetah because it's threatening the livestock. But we want to address the criminal networks that is trafficking cheetah cubs en masse to the Middle East for the pet trade, for example, right? So very important. And working with communities is key. And I know it's difficult for law enforcement in communities. I see there is a real gap there. So really bridging these gaps, working with communities as first-line defenders, also, you know, training them, well, now I'm saying this, to training them, and I said training is not useful, but basically helping them, right, to address these challenges and have a comprehensive approach. What I mean is, we as UNODC invested in so much alternative development for drug trafficking. I think the same needs to be done for environmental crime. You need to give them an alternative income, an alternative, for local communities, be it tourism or be it, I don't know, whatever it is, but there needs to be something. So communities are key when we talk about addressing crimes that affect the environment. Corruption, that's, yeah. We have to be realistic, right? I mean, corruption we will never be able to eradicate. So, and again, I'm also 20 years working in this area, and often I want to just, you know, hit my head against the wall. I think there needs to be different approaches. One is to build, you know, you can build corruption institutions in countries, right? This is one thing, but it's not enough, and it will never get rid of those individuals then who make a phone call and let the seizure go, or I don't know, get the guy out of prison. But maybe when we talked about political will, is also giving those countries sort of the carrot rather than the whip, you know, putting them in the spotlight so that they can't really, you know, be corrupt. What I mean is showing them, you know, giving them the opportunity to be a pilot or to be a champion in fighting transnational organized crime. We see that this approach could work. So if you have countries that are really willing, you identify a few really good actors and you try to work with those actors and you try to overcome this. It's very difficult, I know, but, you know, giving also those countries which are considered maybe more corrupt the opportunity to be champions and to sort of switch the narrative. Just something to think about, but again, I mean, in 2 minutes, difficult to solve. And then the last one, on a positive note, yes, we do see positive changes. Also, you know, when it comes, I mentioned it, when you tell countries, you know, you're losing a lot of revenue, especially when you look at timber or wildlife. So then they start to change and they start to become more interested in the topic. Honestly, I also see a moral shift. You know, it might sound cheesy, but I think people are starting to realize that if we don't do something now, we really lose significant biodiversity and for the next generations. And I'm also, when I speak to countries, I always try to make this point. It is for everybody, it's for the future generations. So I think this is also an important moral shift that we do see. And I stop here. Thank you. Sorry, it was too long.
Yeah, I'll take over and I'll be very brief. Pick first the questions directly put to me, and thank you, Professor Hornich, for putting me on the spot with the National Security Council. Yes, we do have now a National Security Council, and yes, the Federal Ministry for the Environment has not a permanent seat in it. This is due to difficult discussions we had within the government, and yes, we had also the options which we would favor to have a seat, because we are responsible for not only for climate change but also for nuclear safety, and somehow it belongs to the security architecture. However, we also understand and we also need to see the very specific function of that council. It looks in different steps, it looks at the national security in the sense of what do we do, how to protect ourselves against aggression. And this is a military focus. And you might have heard that the first case for the National Security Council is the drone activities. You know, this is not specifically addressed via climate change action or something like that. So we understand that there are cases where, you know, our ministry is not at the forefront. The architecture of the National Security Council is not that bad. It allows and it requires, by law, it requires that affected or involved ministry need to be invited if this is necessary. So whenever, you know, climate or environment somehow plays a role and we are not forgotten by those who organize it, then we will be invited and we will happily take the seat upon invitation. How this comes to, I don't know. This is at the end a political discussion. What ministry needs to be invited? The option of our chancellor was not every ministry, and then you have to draw the line somewhere, and then it goes like it goes. With the question, the many questions of Benjamin are very, very political and highly politically and highly controversial. Trophy hunting is a very, very controversial issue. Our minister was offered 20,000 elephants to be given as a present. We all know this story. There's no easy answer, you know, whether to close for the. I mean, we are not the European Union. We are taking part in the discussion, and we look at the European market, and it's a tough decision, you know, whether to close the market for products. We are not really ruling of what is going on in certain countries. We are looking into our market and what we can do for safeguards for certain serious issues. And if you open the market, then it's somehow the floodgate argument, you know, how to distinguish what is small-scale subsistence activity and what is organized crime with a maximum of profits. I don't give a final answer on that. It's highly controversial, and it shifts like all environmental questions. They are the result of compromise in the society, and it always changes over times, and we are somehow waving on waves, and it goes forwards and backwards. Question of, what's that? Yeah, local communities. We need to think, when we address action, we need to think of local communities, and in our ministry, we try to do that. Sometimes it's difficult to see how. In the project with INTERPOL, it was tremendously important to us that we do also something. We do not only send the police with these guys, but we also wanted to have something beside that to look at the necessities and the needs of the local communities. And that is the reason why WWF is involved in that. We could have done so quite easily just with INTERPOL, send the police, but we wanted to address the issue. What else can be done? Yes, we need to look into alternative sources of income in local communities. You know, where illegal activities are one of the major sources. We need to look into alternative developments. And, you know, this is also being addressed by UNODC. They're not only, you know, the criminal defenders, but they're also putting resources into what can be done in the alternative development. With regard to corruption, also difficult issue, but there are things being done, and there are ideas being developed. We will support and organize a side event in this year's Conference of the Parties of the UNCAC, United Nations Conference Against Corruption, where we somehow link criminal environmental activities to the fight against corruption. And we are doing that with the idea is to showcase modern technology, how to detect illegal activities that are linked to corruption somehow. You know, if reporting, if national reporting is one thing, and then satellite imaging or different sources of new technology knowledge shows the others, then there might be corruption somewhere, and this might give hints to local police forces or local law enforcers to further look into that if you have this diverging information coming out. Our federal Environment Agency is currently developing an application to detect illegally trafficked wildlife species in selling platforms like eBay or that. You can run the app, and then you see if you want to buy something, you can actually prove whether this is suspicious or not. It's on development. This will be one tool that will be showcased in Doha this year in December at the Conference of the Parties. What is good news? Yeah, all what I'm mentioning is good news. First of all, that we meet here together with more or less traditional partners. As I said before, Environment Ministry is not a traditional partner with Interpol or local and police enforcers, but we are here and we are together. And what our mission is from my ministry is to try to channel resources that we can somehow generate a dual use effect. You know, if we want to fight for the rule of law and justice, and we can do with the same amount of money, with the same investment, at the same time, if we can do at the same time something good for the environment, then let's channel the resources. We all know that we are not printing money, you know, we need to use the money wisely, and if we can generate the more uses possible, then we should do that. And this is a political question, and that's why it's a good thing that we are meeting here, and it's a very good news that we are here. I can say from my ministry, the awareness of fighting criminal activities that affect the environment has risen quite a lot. And our minister is heavily interested in this subject, and we are engaging in UNODC and UNCAC, where we have never been active before. So there is good news. You know, we need to get it on the ground, and we are trying to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like not to get back on what has been very eloquently expressed by the distinguished panelists that precede me in the use of the word. I would like to focus on the good news and the way forward. 2 years ago, environmental crimes, not to say crimes that affect the environment, which is the right terminology, or the proper one, we were on a marginal agenda item on other big meetings. But I would say that past year in October, in the UNTO COP with the adoption of the resolution 12/4, it was a turning point in this crusade, in these efforts. We raised enough awareness within the international community on the necessity of addressing organically and have a structured debate on what what are environmental crimes, how environmental crimes affect our society, and which are the steps that we should take in order to move forward and try to tackle this scourge. Past July, we have the first meeting of the open-ended expert group meeting in this topic. It was a very interesting and fruitful exchange of positions. I would say that there is a strong sense in the international community that it's time to act. We have built a political momentum that is very important to take care of and to move forward with. We're going to have a second meeting in end of February next year to draw a concrete set of recommendations on how the international community could address more effectively this challenge. And among these discussion is the possibility of one or more new protocols to the Convention against transnational organized crime. And why is this important? Because now the way it is addressed environmental crime, it's quite diverse and depends on the interest and on the impact of this crime on different on the different countries, on the different nations. So there is no like a uniform standard to address it. And this situation affects the possibility of international cooperation, the provision of technical assistance and funding in this regard. So other good news is that we have made some or we have made enough noise in Vienna that now we are here in Berlin talking about this. So I think this is a good news, and the intention of the group is to keep digging, keep diving on what we need to do. And hopefully, very soon, we will have a very much more international legal framework to address environmental crimes. And what is very important is to highlight that this is not just a member states effort. We need the support of civil society organizations. We need the support of the banking sector to address the illicit financial flows. We need particularly the support of indigenous peoples and local communities, which are at the forefront in this fight. And well, thanks for interesting all of you, dear panelists or dear participants and panelists in this topic. I think we are doing together a great job, and we just need to keep pushing to have a more livable and resilient world. Thank you.
Thank you. I also won't repeat a lot of what's said, which I agree with what was said by the group as a whole and by the panelists. I'll just focus on two issues. The first is on corruption. I remember in 2018 at the London conference, we held, the Wildlife Justice Commission held a side event on corruption, and people thought we were so brave to be saying that, you know, this word, the corruption word that nobody had dared to talk about, and here we are being accepted as one of the key issues affecting environmental crime. And climate finance as well. So I think that's a sign of improvement as well, that this issue is really accepted as something critical that we have to address. And we did a report several years ago at the Wildlife Justice Commission on examples of corruption and best practices of how to address it, really as a way to help policymakers and governments to figure out where their weak parts were. And I'll just one basic thing is compile really, really, really compelling evidence to allow no room for corruption to take shape. And if you give room, if you don't have a really strong case, then you can make an example and then let them go. But so that's part of what we try and do. And forensic accounting, making sure that everything's electronized. But there's lots of examples of how to address it in a really concrete way. Also important on the political side and the policy side, and that's where the UN Anti-Corruption Convention is so important. Several years ago, we felt like we were, again, sort of screaming in the wild with nobody around. And we said, wait, there are so many organizations working on anti-corruption and on environmental crime. Why isn't there a forum for them to work together? So we created the working group under the UNCAC Coalition on Environmental Crime and Corruption. Now has 230 civil society organizations working together, pointing our noses in the same direction, trying to be as effective as we can be. And one of the things we're recommending at the UNCAC CUSP in later this year is a resolution on environmental crime and corruption, because there isn't one right now, and that would help in terms of like building the political movement as well. And it includes a provision on environmental defenders as well, which is absolutely critical, as was noted. And then in terms of improvements, my background's in international criminal law and laws of war, so I see tremendous improvement from when I started in this area 10 years ago. And in addition to the moral and the policy improvements, just on the ground, if you look at what's happening, there is so much improvement. And I'll just give one very quick example. In 2019, the rates of pangolin trafficking were exploding, and we were literally, if those numbers of seizures, that trafficking had continued, the pangolin would have been extinct by 2029. It's not an exaggeration, it's just a fact. Nigeria was the hub of pangolin trafficking coming from the continent into Asia. And we've now seen it's been more than 3 years since there's been a major seizure from Africa to Asia. It's really just slowed down tremendously in terms of the organized criminal networks trafficking and getting their product out. And that means there's time for the pangolins to regroup. And that is phenomenal good news. So I'm really positive, and I've seen so much improvement, and it's thanks to everybody involved in this work together. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much also from my side. First to the audience for giving up part of their lunch to sort of stay here, but there will be enough. But above all, thanks to the panel for highlighting how big of a growing issue it is, but also giving us hope and showing how it has already been addressed in parts and how it can be addressed. So I'd like the audience to join me in a round of applause before we head out for lunch, where you can continue the discussion. Thank you.